Coin traders, how's it going? Thanks for joining me for the show. Looking at graph token GRT on that ticker. Did come in and set our trend high. Currently right now 22.52 is our high. So ever since been scaling back just like a lot of the rest of the cryptos. We know that we have been seeing a lot of topping signals from the crypto space right now and the crypto market as a whole. So especially as we do anticipate the upcoming Bitcoin ETF announcement, we are expecting a little bit of pullback in our retracement just because we have been overextended. Now, not so much for GRT. So if we actually look at where we did kind of find our bottom around the middle of October up to the current trend high right now, almost a 200% gain. So about a 3x off the bottom. Now, one of the things that's really kind of solid about this graph chart right now is just the fact that if we look at these exponential moving averages, the 12 on top, the 26, and then the 50 on the bottom, what we're actually seeing is a very nice, steady, almost parallel type trend where we actually see the prices continue to kick off all these levels, maintaining this trend, not really putting up much of a fight for kind of making us guess what it's going to do. So we've had a very nice, steady, continuous uptrend. And obviously not everything's perfect exactly in terms of levels, but one of the things that's just extremely important and relevant is just how steady this overall uptrend has been, since there hasn't really been too much room for confusion. So ever since we did have our high, pulled back, kicked off the 26, rallied, kicked off the 12, kicked off the 26, kicked off the 26 once again, and now, right now, we are looking whether or not we can defend this 26 on the daily. So that could be one of our first signs that we're actually starting to change this trend, and this is going to be the top. So next sign that we're actually going to look for, especially since we have had such a big pullback right now, is just finding support on top of the previous level of resistance. So previous closing resistance on the day was at 17.52. And now if we actually look to the left a little bit, a closing level of support coming in right at 1780, and that was found on the 30th of December. So very nice start to the year with graph finding this very nice strong rally, and then obviously pulling back now, back testing this level of support, which we actually tested twice. So you can see big point of support, tested as support, and then obviously on this flush did dip below it, but we know that's just not necessarily as accurate, and that's why we do focus on the closes so much, because we can just get these flash crash flushes and then get bought back up really easily, showing the strength of what the true valuation of the price is. So again, big point of support and support, looking left, big point of resistance and resistance. So we know that this is going to be extremely good indicator of how the strength of the price action is going to be right now for GRT, the graph. So if we do in fact break through this zone down below 1752, not only will we be breaking support below this 26 period EMA, which has been support this whole time ever since finding our local bottom here middle of October, but that's also going to confirm this big price level. And then once again, we'll probably get stuck up at this point as being a resistance point, probably before either seeing a little bit more downside or getting some sort of bullish catalyst or a volume influx to actually push back above that as a level. So the thing about that too is that if we actually look at breaking that level, then pretty much we're going to be looking at setting not only a new lower low, but likely it's going to be almost impossible to run up now and set a new higher high. So we are going to be looking at a new lower high and then probably seeing another lower low as well. That could also set up for the potential of a head and type shoulders pattern, which could end up being another indication of farther downside correction and pullback. So now, like we were mentioning about these exponential moving averages, then we would be looking down to actually find support on top of the 50 period exponential moving average. Now that hasn't been tested yet so far on this trend and this run. So we do know that we do need to actually see a test of that level. Typically what happens is that the first two get tested first, and then when they break, we do in fact find support at that 50 period EMA. So it's kind of like that safety net on the downside, pretty much to give us a little bit of hope. But whether or not we can actually sustain and maintain that level of support, we will have to actually find out, because like we said, we are going to be now sitting a new lower low, and does mean we could potentially bounce and then see a lower high. So now do want to flip over into the weekly chart, because a few things to note, and specifically do want to look at this big level of closing weekly resistance. So looking all the way to the left, on top of the big move at the start of last year, we did actually find closing level of resistance, actually not quite, so about 1688 actually found for closing level of resistance. Let's actually move that up a little bit. And so especially recently, you know that we did find closing level of resistance at about 1720. So pretty much from about 1771 to about 1688 all the way up to 1720 was a big zone of weekly closing resistance. So resistance, had another test of resistance here, and then recently on this move, big test of resistance as well. So ever since now, we have had our big bullish candle that not only did it break it, but it's actually bullish engulfing. So we had a very nice bullish candle. Following the weekly after that, the bears actually couldn't even see enough retracement to actually push through that. So we did have the previous week engulfing that bearish week, and then obviously following that, an immediately big spike blowing through that resistance zone. So two big, nice bull candles. Meanwhile, one small bearish candle, both engulfing. Very good sign, especially now on the current 2-week candles, seeing very small bodies on these, especially, not to mention big upside wicks, not necessarily the best sign, but that does typically mean a little bit more longer retracement opportunities where we are going to try to confirm and establish this for the longer term as a nice support pretty much right around the 17-cent level. So since we know that this was a big support zone, we actually can hope that we're going to be able to find this. And we've already back tested this once. So the fact that we have seen it, boom, big resistance points, now we do need to find that structure to actually maintain this as support. And essentially, if we do break through this, then that is going to become another big zone to actually break through once again. But one of the things that has happened also is that we're now starting to get a complete bullish flip on these weekly exponential moving averages. So we haven't had that before, essentially since the beginning of this GRT chart, since it was a pretty new project back at the end of 2020 and the start of 2021. And so right now, a lot of these indicators are just being formed. So this is the first time, kind of like ICP, where we've actually had this crypto in existence for the time where these exponential moving averages can actually be generated, and now in an almost bullish formation flip where we do have 12 on top, 26, and then the 50 on the bottom. So if we actually can see these flip and run up bullish, then we could potentially see a sideways flag pattern, which would confirm this level of support as well as these exponential moving averages. So that would be one of the best bullish cases that we could see, which would actually minimize the retracement and then also confirm extremely big and strong support levels before seeing our next leg to the upside. Like we mentioned, though, that's another big reason why we need this big support zone to actually hold, because if we do break below that, then that's pretty much going to roll up with actually forming the resistance again on top of these weekly exponential moving averages, which could mean potential farther slippage to the downside. Now, if we actually look at a Fibonacci retracement coming off of the low to the high, then one of the things that's actually extremely nice to see is that the 38.2 is always the level we talk about finding a very nice support retracement to. So especially coming off of the top, like we said, at 22.52, that would be that amount of retracement that we could see, which actually aligns perfectly, if you can see over here to the left, between the upper and lower level of these big resistance zones that hopefully should now be support. So that's hopefully another indication that 38.2 right at 16.84 cents should be extremely strong. And ideally, we'd love to be able to hold this level. We could see, sure, some shadows to the downside, but we do need to hold the bodies of this price action for the coming weeks actually on top of this level. That would be one of the strongest things that we could see in terms of longer term upside explosive growth for GRT. Now, one thing I do want to point out that you can actually see it pretty well from this weekly chart is that we actually haven't topped out our trend high from the beginning of last year's bull cycle just yet. So we did have a high of 23.20, like we said, currently at 22.52. So not quite there to a top yet, but we're not that far away. So if we actually look at percentage-wise to the upside, that's less than 3% of an upside move. But from the big supportive resistance, hopefully supportive zone now, 35% to the upside. So plenty of opportunity, which would be seeing that new higher high. If we actually zoom out, then you can see that the next big points of support, previous support anyway, for resistance are going to be coming up about 32 cent level. So from current price points up to that level would be about 60 to essentially about an 80% gain. So if we are successful in being able to maintain this closing level of support on top of this big zone, as well as maintain exponential moving average support after they flip bullish, then that would be a very nice opportunity to actually see GRT rally up into that big zone, since we did know that it was previous support on this way down before actually finding our local lows. Now, I do want to pull up the technicals for this weekly chart because we haven't looked at them in a while, and essentially zooming out, you can see as well, just kind of like the exponential moving averages, how this is the first time we've actually seen weekly overbought indicators on this RSI. So the first move was at 73.51, the next peak was at 72.31. So we do know that we are seeing a little bit of bearish divergence here. So that's another sign and indication that the top for this local trend has come in, and we're starting to see a slowdown in the amount of momentum to the upside. And that's kind of why we would actually look to see and hopefully ideally form support right now, because this is what really solidifies strong market trends, is having nice upside, steady movements and gains, meanwhile retracing, forming longer term established floors, especially when they were strong previous points of resistance. So if we can do that, we would actually see this weekly RSI retrace to the downside, meanwhile maintaining more or less steady price action, which would also be able to allow the stochastic RSI to oscillate to the downside below the 20 line as well, allowing it to form and flip a new bullish direction. So like we said, those are the most bullish things to happen right now in terms of longer term growth. But like we said, we are still at risk of actually changing daily trend and starting to see new lows, especially if we do start to see a lot of sell-off out of the rest of the crypto market space. Then we could potentially see much more room to the downside, which would put us past and below that big supportive zone that we were looking at that was previously weekly resistance. Now, if we do want to talk about a target potentially to the downside, we did have a pretty strong trend line that was acting as support and resistance previously that we could be then eyeing as well. So right now, currently, we would be looking at where we found previous resistance, flipped it into support. So if we do pull back, essentially, we would be looking anywhere from the current price level down to this level. 1520 probably wouldn't hit that low, down to about 1448. So a pretty big zone that we would be looking at as support as well. So if we do look over, pretty much found very nice support as well to that. But then, like we said, that would pretty much only be in the shorter term because we would be changing the trend on this daily chart to the downside, indicating a little bit more of that selling pressure. But that does just mean that we'd be scouting those weekly higher lows. So when we do look at the weekly chart, we do know that we've been rallying up so much, and it is actually time that we do find a longer term weekly low, which is a higher low, just to be clear. But yeah, overall, I'm still pretty convinced that this is a nice setup because one of the things that we actually happened to is that when we did find our local low on the October move, we were looking at a low of 7.65 cents compared to when we actually came off of the FTX flush at the end of last year in 2022. We were actually looking at a low of about 5.16 cents. So we actually held a lot higher of a low for this longer term. So for example, if we actually flipped over into the 1 month chart here, you can see just how apparent this is, and especially as we do look at the overall upside price action. So found our low, upside price action, long steady pullback, holding a higher low, and now we are tightening up a little bit, trying to break these previous highs and form a new longer term uptrend. So personally, I think right now, based on everything that we're seeing and what potentially we would need to see for setups, we are not going to see too much exciting things happen between now and probably whenever we do start to establish this longer term monthly chart. So I think a lot of the excitement for the upside has probably come in until we start to consolidate on the longer term and until we start getting more bullish events and news driven into the space. Because right now, a lot of this big move for the whole crypto space right now has just been propelled on a lot of upside based on the ETF hype and halving hype and things like that. So we do need a chance to cool down, calm down, and see new money enter the space on a lot more good longer term bullish news. But so yeah, that actually is going to go ahead and wrap up the show for today on GRT. Would love to know everyone's thoughts, comments, predictions, agreements, disagreements, all that stuff down below in the comments section. If you're not currently following me here over on Twitter or X, definitely drop me a follow. We talk about a lot of different cryptos and have a lot of great discussions, so it's a little bit easier, and I'm much more active on that than being able to post these type of videos. So do look forward to chatting with everyone over there, but also don't forget to drop me a note down in the comments sections below. And if you did enjoy the video today, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe if you have not done so just yet. Plenty more videos coming out for updates as we do enter a much more exciting cycle than 2 years of continuous bear market. But all right, that's going to do it for now, though, so stay safe, take care, and I'll catch you back in the next video.